In the frozen wilderness of the northern Ural Mountains, in February of 1959, 9 experienced hikers set out on what was meant to be a challenging but rewarding journey. They were young, ambitious, and skilled. University students and graduates who loved the thrill of mountaineering. But within weeks, their adventure turned into one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Their tent was found slashed open from the inside, their belongings left neatly behind, their bodies discovered at different locations, some barefoot, some half-dressed, some with devastating injuries that defied explanation. For decades, speculation has swirled. Was it a natural disaster, a secret military test, or something stranger, perhaps even paranormal? This is the Dyatlov Pass Incident, an unsolved case that has baffled experts, historians, and conspiracy theorists alike for more than 60 years. Welcome to Echoes of the Unsolved. Tonight we're going to dig into the timeline, the evidence, the theories, and the legacy of this haunting case. By the end you'll have heard every major explanation, from the scientific to the supernatural, and you can decide for yourself what really happened on that mountain slope in 1959. To understand the Dyatlov Pass incident, we first need to step back into the Soviet Union of the late 1950s. The Cold War was in full swing. Nuclear weapons testing, military secrecy, and government propaganda were part of everyday life. The Soviet state controlled not only the press but also access to information. Accidents, disasters, and embarrassing failures were often hidden from public view. At the same time, there was a culture of youth exploration, endurance, and physical achievement. University students across the USSR participated in challenging mountaineering expeditions, encouraged by both their schools and the government. These expeditions symbolized strength, discipline, and patriotism. Among the students of the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk, now Yekaterinburg, was a group of friends who lived and breathed this culture. They were skilled in skiing, hiking, and survival. Most of them were in their early 20s, in the prime of their lives. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student, known for his intelligence, determination, and leadership skills. He was meticulous in planning trips, often constructing his own equipment and tools for the group. The others respected him deeply, and it was under his leadership that this ill-fated expedition began. The group consisted of 9 when they set out, though originally there were 10. Let's meet them. Because too often they are remembered only as victims, when in reality they were young people with vibrant lives. Igor Dyatlov, 23, the leader, confident and methodical. Yuri Doroshenko, 21, strong and adventurous, once chased a bear with nothing but a hammer. Lyudmila Dubinina, 20, outspoken and determined, the only woman besides Zenaida in the group. Zenaida Kolmogorova, 22, energetic, cheerful, popular among her peers. Rustam Slobodin, 23, athletic, often described as reliable and calm. Nikolai Thibault Brignol, 23, intelligent, practical, from a family of French ancestry. Alexander Kolovatov, 24, reserved but technically skilled. Yuri Krivonishenko, 23, playful, known for his sense of humor. Semyon Zolotaryov, 38, the oldest of the group, a World War II veteran, joining the younger students on this trip. There was also a 10th member at the start, Yuri Yudin. However, early in the trek, he fell ill with joint pain and had to turn back. He would later become the only survivor, and his memories of his friends would haunt him for the rest of his life. On January 23, 1959, the hikers departed from Sverdlovsk by train. They were heading deep into the Urals, toward Mount Otorten, a remote peak in the northern region. Their plan was ambitious, a challenging 300-kilometer route through snow and sub-zero temperatures. They kept detailed diaries, took photographs, and even wrote humorous notes about their experiences. These documents would later become crucial for reconstructing the timeline of events. From Sverdlovsk, they traveled by train to Ivdel, then by truck to the village of Vizhai, the last inhabited settlement before the wilderness. From there, they set out on skis into the deep snow, carrying heavy packs and all their supplies. The first days went smoothly. Spirits were high and the group sang songs and joked with one another. But as they climbed higher into the mountains, the weather worsened. Snowstorms, freezing winds, and reduced visibility slowed their progress. Still, this was nothing unexpected for such a group. They were skilled and prepared. On January 28th, one member, Yuri Yudin, was forced to turn back due to his illness. Though disappointed, the others encouraged him to return safely. Yudin would later say goodbye to his friends for the last time, watching them disappear into the snowy forest. By February 1st, the 9 remaining hikers had reached the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name in the local Mansi language chillingly translates to Mountain of the Dead. Instead of descending to a nearby forest for shelter, the group chose to set up camp high on the slope, about 1,100 meters above sea level. Why they did this remains debated. Some say Dyatlov wanted to practice camping in harsh conditions. Others believe they lost daylight and simply pitched camp where they were. That night, they cooked a simple meal inside the tent. Photographs from their cameras show smiling faces, laughter, and the camaraderie of friends at the end of a long day. Nothing seemed amiss. But sometime during the night, something happened. Something that caused 9 experienced hikers to flee their tent, barefoot and barely dressed, into temperatures as low as -30 degrees Celsius. Something that would leave them scattered across the mountainside, dead within hours. The Dyatlov Pass Incident had begun. When the hikers failed to return home on schedule, concern quickly grew. Families waited anxiously for word, but in the Soviet Union, delays were common in winter expeditions. At first, nobody panicked, but as days turned into weeks and no messages came, relatives began demanding action. On February 20th, 1959, a search operation was finally organized. Students, volunteers, local Mansi hunters, and eventually the Soviet military joined the effort. The searchers trekked through waist-deep snow and brutal winds, scouring the mountainside for any trace of the missing group. What they found was stranger than anyone could have imagined. On February 26th, the first major clue was discovered: the hiker's tent. It was located on the slope of Kholat Syakhl, partially buried in snow. But what shocked searchers was its condition. The tent had been slashed open from the inside. Inside, everything was left as if the hikers had just stepped out for a moment. Boots neatly arranged, jackets folded, food supplies, diaries, and even cameras. Nothing appeared stolen. Nothing scattered by a struggle. Yet there was no sign of the hikers themselves. Around the tent, investigators noted footprints, dozens of them, leading down the slope toward the nearby forest. Some were barefoot. Some wore only socks. A few had a single boot. It looked as if the group had fled in a rush, without taking time to dress for the freezing conditions. But why? Following the footprints, searchers soon made a grim discovery at the edge of the forest, about 1.5 kilometers from the tent. Beneath a tall cedar tree lay the first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko. They were barefoot, dressed only in underwear and light shirts. Their hands were burned, and branches of the cedar tree were broken several meters high, as if they had desperately climbed to escape something, or perhaps to look back toward their tent. Nearby, remnants of a small fire were found. It seemed the 2 had tried to light a blaze to survive the freezing night, but it hadn't been enough. Between the cedar tree and the tent, 3 more bodies were found over the next few days: Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. They appeared to have died while trying to crawl back to the tent. Their position suggested determination but also exhaustion. All showed signs of hypothermia, but Slobodin also had a fractured skull. Though not immediately fatal, it was enough to raise questions. At this stage, 5 of the 9 were still missing. Winter turned to spring, and as the snow melted in May, the remaining 4 hikers were finally found in a ravine, about 75 meters from the cedar tree. This discovery deepened the mystery. Lyudmila Dubinina was found with broken ribs, missing her eyes, and, disturbingly, missing her tongue. Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest of the group, had severe chest fractures that experts later compared to the force of a car crash. Alexander Kolovatov had head injuries and strange skin discoloration. Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles suffered a massive skull fracture. Unlike the first group, these 4 were dressed more warmly, as if they had taken clothing from the bodies of their friends. Radiation was reportedly detected on some garments, though the source was never fully explained. The condition of the bodies was shocking. While hypothermia could explain the deaths of the first 5, these 4 had injuries far too severe to be caused by simply falling or freezing. Yet there were no external wounds, no cuts, no bruises consistent with combat. It was as if an immense force had crushed them from the inside. The medical examinations only deepened the puzzle. Doroshenko and Krivonishenko died from hypothermia, burns on hands and feet. Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, hypothermia, with Slobodin showing a skull fracture. Thibault-Brignol, fatal skull trauma. Zolotaryov and Dubinina, massive chest fractures with internal bleeding but no external damage. Dubinina also missing tongue and eyes. Forensic experts said the chest injuries were comparable to the force of a high-speed car crash, but there were no signs of blunt objects, no evidence of weapons, and no avalanches in the area at the time. Adding to the strangeness, traces of radiation were found on some of the clothing, though Soviet officials later claimed this was due to contaminated equipment from their university labs. Skeptics have long doubted this explanation. The cause of death was officially recorded as an unknown compelling force.
The Soviet government quickly classified the case. Files were sealed and soldiers guarded the bodies during their funerals. Families reported that the coffins were sealed and heavily waxed. Some who glimpsed the bodies spoke of strange skin discoloration and hair that looked unnaturally grey or orange. Officials dismissed many of these claims as exaggerations. The final conclusion was that the hikers had died due to a spontaneous force of nature. No further details were given. The case was closed in May 1959. But closing the file did not close the mystery. The Dyatlov Pass Incident left behind a haunting set of contradictions. Why did 9 experienced hikers flee their tent in sub-zero temperatures without proper clothing? Why was the tent cut open from the inside when the entrance flap was intact? Why did some victims show signs of violent trauma while others froze to death? Where did the traces of radiation come from? Why did Soviet authorities seal the case so quickly and guard the bodies? Each answer seemed to lead only to more questions, and where questions exist, theories inevitably follow. In the decades since 1959, countless explanations have been proposed, from avalanches and snowstorms to military cover-ups to UFOs and even monsters of legend. Some theories are scientific, some are imaginative, and some are chilling in their plausibility. In the next chapter, we'll dive deep into the leading theories and explore what might truly have happened on that mountain slope.
The Dyatlov Pass incident has inspired more theories than almost any other unsolved case in modern history. Some are grounded in science, others in folklore, and many in conspiracy. Let's explore the leading explanations, one by one, weighing the evidence for and against each. Theory 1. Avalanche. The most common explanation is the simplest: an avalanche. According to this theory, a slab of snow broke loose and threatened to bury the hikers' tent. In panic, they slashed their way out and fled into the night, underdressed and disoriented. This could explain why the tent was cut from the inside, why the hikers left without proper gear, why some bodies had fractures consistent with heavy pressure. But there are serious problems with this theory. Investigators at the time found no evidence of an avalanche, no debris, no distinct snow patterns, and the slope was relatively shallow at only about 15 degrees. Survivors of real avalanches often described thunderous noise and catastrophic burial, yet here the tent remained partly standing, with items still neatly inside. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the case, and once again concluded an avalanche was the cause. They cited new computer models suggesting a delayed slab avalanche, triggered by unusual snow conditions. But critics argue this still doesn't explain the missing tongue, missing eyes, radiation, or the fact that 9 experienced hikers would have recognized avalanche danger long before setting up camp. The avalanche theory is possible, but far from universally accepted. Theory 2. Katabatic wind. A more recent scientific explanation involves a rare weather phenomenon: katabatic winds. These are sudden, violent gusts that can sweep down mountainsides, reaching hurricane force. If such winds struck the tent at night, the hikers may have panicked, thinking it was an avalanche. In fear, they slashed the tent and fled. This could explain their behavior without needing an actual avalanche. The cold and darkness then finished what the storm began. The weakness of this theory is that katabatic winds are usually documented in places like Antarctica, not the Urals. Still, it's scientifically plausible, and it explains the panic without supernatural elements. Theory 3. Infrasound. Another intriguing scientific theory involves infrasound, low-frequency vibrations below the range of human hearing. In certain wind conditions, the mountain's shape could generate infrasound waves, causing physical discomfort, nausea, dizziness, and intense feelings of fear or panic. If the hikers were suddenly overcome with irrational terror, they may have slashed their way out of the tent and fled into the night, not thinking clearly. This could explain why trained hikers acted so strangely, but it does not explain the severe physical injuries, chest fractures, and skull damage found on some victims. Theory 4. Paradoxical undressing. When people suffer from hypothermia, their bodies can react in strange ways. One symptom is paradoxical undressing, a sensation of burning heat, causing victims to strip off their clothing even in freezing conditions. This might explain why some of the hikers were found half naked. It's a well-documented phenomenon in hypothermia cases. But paradoxical undressing alone cannot explain why the group left their tent in the first place, nor the traumatic injuries. It's more likely a contributing factor, not the main cause. Theory 5. Carbon monoxide poisoning. Some researchers suggest the hikers may have been poisoned by carbon monoxide from their stove. If smoke or gas filled the tent, they could have become disoriented, panicked, and fled outside for air. Carbon monoxide can cause confusion, hallucinations, and poor decision-making. This would explain the seemingly irrational decision to leave their shelter. But carbon monoxide poisoning leaves telltale signs in the blood, and none were recorded in the autopsies. It also doesn't explain the severe fractures in some victims. Theory 6. Military testing. Now we move into darker territory. The Ural Mountains were a region of secret Soviet military activity. Some believe the hikers stumbled into an area where weapons were being tested. Parachute mines, rockets, or chemical agents. Explosions could explain the blunt force injuries, the shockwave of a blast causing internal damage without external wounds. Bright flashes in the sky, reported by other witnesses in the area, could have been flares or weapons tests. Radiation on the hikers' clothing might also be linked to military materials. And the rapid sealing of the case by Soviet authorities suggests a cover-up. Skeptics argue there is no direct evidence of weapons testing at that specific time and place. But secrecy was the rule in 1950s Russia. The possibility cannot be dismissed. Theory 7. The KGB connection. Related to the military theory is the idea that some members of the group may have been working with, or against, the KGB, the Soviet secret police. Semyon Zolotaryov, the oldest member, was a war veteran with a mysterious background. Some speculate he was involved in intelligence work. Could the hikers have been witnesses to something they weren't supposed to see? Could they have been silenced? This theory could explain the brutal injuries, the secrecy, and the official vagueness. But again, there is no hard evidence linking the hikers to espionage. It remains speculation. Theory 8. UFOs. Perhaps the most famous and controversial explanation is extraterrestrial. Some locals reported seeing strange glowing orbs in the sky around the time of the incident. If the hikers saw the same, perhaps they panicked, thinking they were under attack. Others go further, suggesting direct contact with a UFO or extraterrestrial beings caused the injuries. While intriguing, this theory has little physical evidence. It mainly survives because of the sheer mystery surrounding the case. Theory 9. The Yeti. Local Mansi legends speak of spirits and creatures in the mountains. Over time, one idea took hold in popular culture. The hikers were attacked by a Yeti. Proponents point to the missing tongue, the crushed chests, and a peculiar photograph found in one of the hikers' cameras showing what some interpret as a humanoid figure. Skeptics dismiss this as folklore mixed with imagination. The Yeti photo is blurry and likely shows one of the hikers themselves. Still, the theory endures in popular retellings. Theory 10. Radiation accident. Another line of speculation involves radiation. Some of the clothing tested positive for radioactive contamination. Was the group exposed to fallout from a secret test or contaminated equipment? The area was not far from military sites, and the late 1950s saw frequent nuclear tests across the USSR. But radiation alone doesn't explain the panic, the tent being cut, or the trauma injuries. It may have been a factor, but not the full story. Theory 11. A combination. One possibility is that multiple factors converged. Perhaps the hikers were disoriented by infrasound or carbon monoxide, fled the tent, and some then fell into a ravine, suffering fatal injuries. The cold and hypothermia then claimed the rest. In complex accidents, it's often not one cause but several that align in a deadly chain of events. Weighing the evidence. So where does this leave us? Natural explanations, avalanche, wind, infrasound, can account for panic and exposure, but not all injuries. Military explanations fit the secrecy, radiation, and trauma, but lack solid proof. Paranormal explanations are captivating but speculative. What makes the Dyatlov Pass incident so enduring is that every theory explains some aspects, but none explain them all. As years turned into decades, survivors, family members, and researchers demanded answers, and eventually, the case was reopened. But would the new investigations bring clarity, or only deepen the mystery? For decades, the Dyatlov Pass incident was shrouded in secrecy. The Soviet Union in 1959 was not known for transparency, and officials quickly closed the case, citing only a vague, compelling natural force. Families were left with grief, confusion, and suspicion, but the story refused to stay buried. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, as the Soviet Union collapsed and glasnost, a new era of openness, took hold, previously hidden files began to surface. Researchers and journalists gained access to original reports, autopsies and photographs. The more people saw, the stranger the case appeared. Why were the hikers' injuries so inconsistent? Why was radiation present? Why were documents missing or redacted? Independent investigators began to challenge the official version, writing books and articles that brought the Dyatlov mystery to a global audience. Families of the victims also spoke more freely, recalling the secrecy of the funerals, the restrictions on viewing the bodies, and the unanswered questions. In 2019, the Russian Prosecutor General's office reopened the case. After a year of study, they concluded, once again, that an avalanche was the cause. This time, researchers pointed to a specific kind of delayed slab avalanche. According to computer simulations, a snow slab could have detached above the tent several hours after the hikers pitched camp, triggered by wind or the hikers' own digging. The weight of the snow may have pressed against the tent, convincing the group that a full avalanche was imminent. In panic, they cut their way out and fled downhill. The severe injuries could have come later, when some of the hikers fell into a ravine and were crushed by snow and ice. Not everyone was convinced. Critics point out that the slope was shallow, the snow depth was limited, and no obvious avalanche debris was found by searchers at the time. Others argue the avalanche theory is a convenient way to close the case without admitting to military or secretive causes. Yet supporters insist it is the most scientifically grounded explanation. The debate continues. Regardless of the truth, the Dyatlov Pass incident has become a cultural phenomenon. Countless books, documentaries and films have explored the mystery, from serious investigations to horror movie reimaginings. Online forums and podcasts dissect every detail, keeping the debate alive for new generations. The case has even inspired video games and fictional retellings, cementing its place in popular culture. For Russians especially, the story resonates as a symbol of both the resilience of youth and the secrecy of the Soviet era. For the world, it remains a haunting, unsolved puzzle. And so, after more than 60 years, the Dyatlov Pass remains a place of questions. Every new explanation brings us closer, but the full truth may forever be lost in the snow. The Dyatlov Pass incident endures because it is not just a mystery. It is a mirror. A mirror of our fears, of the wilderness, of the unknown, of the unseen forces that can undo even the strongest among us. A mirror of our imaginations. Aliens, yetis, secret weapons, ghostly winds. The human mind fills in gaps where facts fall short. And a mirror of history, a reminder of the Cold War's secrecy, of families kept in the dark, of a system where truth was often buried deeper than the snow itself. What we know. 9 hikers set out on an adventure, full of life and youth, and never returned. Their tent was found slashed open. Their bodies were discovered scattered across the mountain. Some were lightly dressed, others brutally injured. Radiation was present on their clothes. The official answer was vague, and doubts remain to this day. What we don't know. Why did they flee their tent? What caused such severe injuries? Why the secrecy, the inconsistencies, the lingering strangeness? These questions are what keep the case alive. The most likely explanation, according to modern science, is that the hikers panicked in the face of a natural event, whether avalanche, wind, or some combination of factors, and tragedy followed. But even this leaves holes. The Dyatlov Pass incident is not just a case file, it is a story reshaped each time it is told, each time new evidence is considered, each time someone stares at those haunting photographs and wonders, what really happened? For the families, the loss was personal and profound. For the world, it became legend. The Dyatlov Pass will always draw hikers, researchers, and dreamers, people who want to stand where the group once camped, to feel the icy wind, to glimpse the mystery for themselves. And as long as the questions outnumber the answers, the story will never die. In the end, perhaps the truth is simple. 9 young people ventured into the wilderness, and nature, or fate, proved too powerful. Or perhaps the truth is stranger, buried beneath decades of secrecy, never to be revealed. The Dyatlov Pass incident is a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, but they are meant to be remembered. This has been Echoes of the Unsolved. Thank you for watching.